accept to be challenged. That's why we are here as souls. The really important thing is, how do we respond to the challenges that have come to us? And this question is the essence of what yoga is about. Thank you, Riemann, for inviting me to Sadhana Devi to participate in your Sunday service. And welcome to all of you in Ananda, Seattle. And perhaps if this is broadcast online, welcome also to those of you online. We're going to begin today. I'm going to ask Sadhana Devi to start with the reading from Whispers from Eternity.
Okay.
This one right there.
Yeah. Well, let's see. Yeah, I guess I better use those. Oh, Father, may I behold thee above, beneath, behind, around, wherever I turn my gaze. Train the children of my senses never to stray from thee, who dwellest at the heart of everything. Turn my eyes inward to thy changeless beauty. Attune my ears to silence, that I may hear thy subtlest music. Breathe on me the heavenly scent of thy sacred presence. Orient-wise I will worship thee, placing the candles of my five senses on the altar of my love. Thus I will contact thee in the first pale shafts of dawn, absorb thee in the bright light of noon, expand in thee with the hidden glow of twilight, and merge in thee in the silver moonlight. Always will I keep alight on my inner altar the mystic taper of my love for thee. Okay.
Thank you, Sadhana. As Padma introduced, both Sadhana Devi and I have been in India for quite a while, for many years. We went there in 2006, and I've been there pretty much on and off steadily since then. Sadhana perhaps a little bit less. And I said, when it's inevitable that when you spend a lot of time in a foreign country, different country, you become aware of the differences, of course, between your country and that country. And as we were tasked in India, to present Master's teachings, it's often that I've noticed that the questions that I receive back from the audience, the inquiries, point and what they pick up on is a little bit different than it is in the West. And one of the things that was often I noticed as serving in India after giving a lecture, that the Indian audience is often very sensitive to a point. This question you might ask, is it possible for a householder to be a yogi? I'm interested in serving in the world. I have so many duties in life, and how can I possibly be a devotee? And when I've got all of this responsibility on my plate, and it's not a question it is asked in the United States as well, in the West, but it's not nearly so much of a focus as it is in India, and it's cultural. Because the tradition of seeking God is presented culturally as going off into the jungle or in the mountains, total renunciation. And there's a little bit of a bias, you might say, from past ages, that householders are a bit of a second-class devotee. You might say, if you're really serious, you're going to not be a householder. You're going to go to the ashram or perhaps somewhere far away. And I think this is, when you see it from that Indian perspective, I came to realize that when Master wrote in the autobiography of Yogi, that story of Lahiri Mahashaya going to the Himalayas up in Ranikhet and being initiated by Babaji, what does Babaji do? Lahiri Mahashaya wants to join him as a yogi in the Himalayas, forsake everything, leave it behind. Now, that's a traditional approach. And of course, we know Babaji said, no, send him back. You sent Lahiri back to set an example. that we had entered into a new age. Now, that story resonates with everybody, but it's particularly resonant. And I think Master, when he wrote that, was responding to that question in India. And there's also, think of the story how Mukunda is always wanting to go up in the Himalayas to become a yogi as a young boy. And he meets Ram Gopal Muzumdar, who dissuades him finally of that. He says, don't you have in your room a little place that you can be by yourself that's quiet? And Mukunda answered, well, yes, his little bedroom. He says, make that. That's your cave. That's your Himalayan cave. And there you'll find God. And he went back. But this idea of a real yogi is aloof from worldly affairs there's, you see this, and it's a misunderstanding. But if we look at the life of our masters, I mean, look at the life of Paramahansa Yogananda, he was intensely interested. So being a yogi does not mean that we're just going to turn our back on the world. We might say, and if you look at the disciples of Paramahansa Yogananda, Rajasi Janakananda was intensely involved in business affairs, and Mr. Black was similarly. They were very interested. Master himself was very interested. There's a story when Peggy Dietz, one of his disciples, and who was his driver for some time in his latter years, she would drive Master from Mount Washington out to the Lake Shrine. And as he would go through that area, if you know Los Angeles, Pacific Palisades and through that area, down Sunset Boulevard, she would say there was a construction site going on there. Big house was being built, and Master was intensely interested. And he'd stop, say, stop, and he'd get out of the car. She'd keep it running, and he'd go up and inspect the work, and check it out. And he did this regularly. It's like, might say he was the owner of the house. But he was just interested in, and his nature was that way. If you read the autobiography, you could see he was engaged. Even, as it said, he came up with novel inventions for this and that, and he kept abreast of what was going on. And this was a very important aspect of Master's work. It was emblematic, you could say. He exemplified that, but he had come with a special mission to do away with that whole understanding, to spiritualize. The message was spiritualize every aspect of our life: home, temple, job, school, job, meditation room. And Swamiji was just the same way. He's very interested. Now, Swamiji didn't know how electronic gadgets worked on the engineering level, but he was intensely interested of how they could be used to spread Master's message. And so he was always interested in what was going on outwardly around him. And there was that story, that he himself had to dissuade people from that misunderstanding. And because that fellow up in Vancouver, who was a rich fellow, businessman, I suppose, was showing Swamiji around his house. And when he came to his meditation room, which he was extremely interested in showing Swami, he says, when I come home from work every day, I take off my shoes, I clean myself up, and this is where my life begins, in his meditation room. Now that sounds very pious, doesn't it? But Swami said, oh, I'm so sorry to hear that. I'm sad to hear that. And of course, that took the man back. He says, you waste all your day engaged in worldly affairs. Why not bring God into everything you do? And consequently, the message here is if you're interested in something, by all means, go into it, pay attention. And the problem is not being interested in this creation, it's being disinterested in the Creator. That's really what it is. Because you find when your interest in God, the creator of this universe, of all these wondrous things, which, by the way, Master said, are made for our entertainment and education, which, of course, would not always entertained or educated. But he says, if you're interested in the creation, give it your attention, but don't forget the creator. And he would demonstrate this, that he'd take the monks to the movies or the and maybe the nuns too, I'm not sure, but certainly when Swamiji went with the monks, he would the monks would get very engaged in the movie, and Master would reach over and tap the monk on the shoulder, just to, as they were totally engaged, and he'd point up and he says, "Look at the beam, enjoy the movie for what it is, but don't forget, look at the beam. It's just a play of light and shadow." Now, why am I introducing ice? You might say I'm starting my talk off this one. You might be asking why. And because these last few years have been really interesting, haven't they? And in forcing us to be engaged in this world in a lot of different ways, new ways, novel ways. Here, this whole world of online reaching out has exploded, certainly in the United States, and I'm absolutely exploded in India, reaching out thousands and thousands, hundreds of thousands of people, maybe more. And this has been revolutionary, but it's forced us the challenges that we've been facing. In India was hit quite hard with the second wave of COVID. We've all been challenged. The pandemic, and you look here in the United States, same thing. Nationally, here you look at the discord that's taken place, the disruption from the pandemic, and what's just passed now. We had this election cycle, and I know some people are very, very interested in that, and some people say, "Oh, I don't want to be interested in that at all," but they really are. They just don't want to admit it, and they're so, because, "Oh, that's not spiritual." Well, yes, I understand the difficulties of getting engaged and all that. And we perhaps have better things to do, but nevertheless, that's what's happening. It's the world around us. And unfortunately, I have some friends who are very interested in election, one way or the other, and they get so riled up. I could see that, it's like, "Oh, this guy's going to win, they're losing," and so on. To be interested is one thing, but to be reactive, you see, and that's the problem. We get super interested in something, but then we become attached to it. It doesn't turn out the way we wanted it to. And then what do? We find, it's like watching a football game. We're up and we're down. The Seahawks are winning. Now they're losing. I think that's a good image for us in living in life. And if you're a sports fan, you learn to say, okay, you enjoy it, but your life doesn't circle around it. You don't live and die by it, although some sports fans do. But coming back, life has challenged us, and you might say, what else is it going to do? We're not here except to be challenged. That's why we are here as souls, to overcome whatever karmic challenges that we have are in store for us. But the important thing is not how the challenge comes to us. The important thing is not getting involved, doing a good job, responding appropriately. The really important thing is, how do we respond to the challenges that have come to us? And this question is the essence of what yoga is about: learning to overcome or neutralize that waves of feeling, the reactive process. And challenges and difficulties are there specifically to point out the obstacles that separate us from God. So bringing it down on a day-to-day level, what happens when somebody's unkind to you? They say something nasty that's not nice. Somebody treats you badly, or things go against you. Do you get angry? Do you get upset? Do you live and die by what's going on outside of you? How do you act? Do you act negatively? And can we, the challenge, of course, is, David, can we maintain what Master advises to be even-minded and cheerful in all circumstances? We're told that, but how? How do we do that? And this is November, and it's getting into be late November. And what do we have in late November every year? We have what is, for me, I think, is my favorite holiday of the year, Thanksgiving. Can we say, "Thank you, God"? And that is what I think what makes Thanksgiving such a beautiful time of year for me. Change, as Jnana Mata said, change no circumstance, Lord, when she was praying and seeing something difficult, challenge coming her way. Change no circumstance, Lord, change me. And to the degree we can see everything these things that have happened to us, thank you, God. My team won, my team lost. I had this challenge, that challenge. Keeping that attitude, the good, thank you, God. The bad, thank you, God. And seeing it as a challenge. Life has reached out to us very particularly to give us those things that we need. And this is the lesson that we need to learn to engage with life with a positive attitude and be grateful. Renunciation or non-attachment is the essence of that. To positive, people of course, we have to explain this to some degree, but people can't see. Renunciation is positively embracing life. You see, what are we renouncing? We're really renouncing those attachments, ego attachments, and this is the right attitude to take. And the faster we can accommodate the present reality, the changes that have happened, and we've had changes, a lot of difficulties, challenges. Who's to say that maybe that's just the beginning? But the faster we can accommodate to whatever happens in our life, good or bad, the happier and more effective we'll be. You see, I always, in India, when teaching this, mentioning this, I always bring up that word effective, appropriate, because it's not turning our back to the world and not engaging in there. Is like, well, how can I be effective in life? And to be a renunciation. A renunciation in that sense, in the positive sense, makes us more infected. We're clear-eyed because we're not thrown off by all of those other worldly concerns, and we can focus on what's really, really important. And if we, that reading this morning, in the prodigal son, there's an important point in there. And when you hear that story, the tendency is to think about the prodigal son returning and how kind the father is. And of course, this is all symbolic. It's the soul gone out into this world of duality, and at a certain point realizes my true home is back in God, and goes back. And so we're thinking of the father. He gets back home, and he's the fatted calf, and bring out the robe and the ring. But the most important point in my mind in that story is the moment that the prodigal son decided, I don't want this world anymore of suffering, and turned his back to that. He didn't turn his back to the world, he turned his back to the suffering, and he decided to bring God into his life. And that's really, when we talk about going off and renouncing, what we renounce is the ego attachment to all of those things. And we turn our back and we turn to God. And when we do that, you could say our road back is secure. It's just a matter of time when we turn ourselves to God and we are replenished. God brings out the fatted calf and the robe and the ring. And it's just a matter of time. But that turning is the challenge. But that turning is not a one-time thing in life. It's in moment by moment by moment. Every moment we are prodigal children when our mind is going off into engage with the worldly attitude, looking at this life in the wrong way. But if we can bring that back and step back, and then you could say, success will be assured. And even in the momentary things of what we're doing, we're all prodigal children at one point or another. And turning ourselves back to God is the message that each one of us has to do. Now, how do you do all these things? I have just a few minutes left here if I'm going to stay on time. So I just would like to quickly mention a couple of things. One is, of course, I just mentioned, is maintaining the right perspective. Enjoy this world, but don't forget the Creator. And don't forget who made this world and who sustains us in this world. Enjoy it, you could say, with God. Remember God, but yes. And God, in a sense, enjoys this world through us as being an instrument. And we enjoy it in the right way, in God consciousness. But I'd like to offer to you an experiment. what we're talking about here is really this essence of yoga, of non-attachment to the likes and dislikes of this world, neutralizing the likes and dislikes in the world. And I've often thought of this, and I don't want to, you start off by thinking, oh, I don't like anything and I don't want to dislike anything and be somewhat neutral. And you realize that just really doesn't quite work. But instead of having likes and dislikes, is it possible to like everything? If you like everything, there's no duality to it because there's no other. Is that possible? Well, I've sort of approached it from the other side also. Is it possible to not dislike anything? Don't dislike anything. And if you don't dislike anything, you'll find you like everything. And in a sense, because I've noticed in life that people who dislike, they have a lot of dislikes. Oh, I don't like that. Oh, I can't stand that. Oh, I hate red cars. Oh, I hate pepper in my food. Oh, it's too hot. Oh, it's too cold. I dislike. They're never happy. They're never content. They're always restless and they're always running. And if you just learn to be able to accept in God and remember that neutrality, then inwardly practice. Now, to be able to do this, inwardly practice, say, thank you, God, for whatever comes. And do what's appropriate. I'm not saying, not to act. I'm just saying do what's appropriate. Don't act from a position not of like or dislike, but why not just turn those what's the softening of a like and dislike? It's having preferences. I prefer vanilla ice cream. I don't over chocolate, let's say. It's not that I hate chocolate. It's just, or anything. I don't hate anything. I prefer this, I prefer that. But if it's not there, fine, whatever comes of itself, let it come and I'll enjoy that too. If we can learn to take this attitude, our life becomes so much easier and nicer. And I think the essence of this is the quality that has to be able to develop that is to be calm in the midst of storms. That calmness comes when we go deep in our meditation, we go deep into that feeling of peace. Chitta remains, feeling remains. You still you feel, but ego goes. That ego from attachment, of the desire, all of those things. And my experience has been that as calmness develops within you, desires naturally degrade into preferences. You don't care one way or the other, but you are a human. So you go, yeah, I like that more than that, or I prefer that. And you find dispassion begins to come. And I'll end in this. What is dispassion really? Dispassion is not turning your back on the world. It's not feeling. Dispassion is engendered by deep love of remembering God. When you love God, it's, you could say that dispassion is a result and of a practice of deep love for God. When you really love God, you just don't care about all these other trivial things. And make that the focus. And then you find everything else the world begins to cooperate with you. You turn your face at the prodigal child to God and you move in that direction. And somehow God, the universe, was waiting for that moment and begins to give you support. So there's more that could be said in this, but let's just assume that, or take it as a fact that God is waiting for us and has given us much to enjoy in this world. Say thank you, God. But thank you for the presence, your presence, the divine presence in everything that we see, everything that we do. And I wish you all it's on behalf of Sadhana Devi, we wish you a very happy Thanksgiving, which is coming, not here yet, but it's soon around the corner, and perhaps carry these thoughts into the holiday season and then, of course, into the Christmas season. Joy to all of you, and thank you very much for having us today.
Oh, green summer fade and winter draw near, my Lord, in your presence